Hey, David, so glad you could be here today. Let me tell everybody a little bit about what you have done and what you do. Uh, David Blecman's been shooting professionally since right out of high school in the late 70s. He shot projects for companies such as Sears, KB Toys, Seagram's, Hilton Hotels, the White House. He's also been hired to photograph such celebrities as President George W. Bush, Christina Aguilera, Jimmy Buffett, Beyonce and Destiny's Child, Celine Dion, Gene Simmons and Kiss, and numerous others. Well, those must have been some very interesting shots. I would have liked to have seen the session with President George Bush and Gene Simmons at the same time. That would have been very interesting. Maybe we can talk about that some other time. But anyhow, I wanted to start off the interview with asking you if you would explain the difference between fashion and commercial modeling.
Sure. Well, as you know, fashion modeling is a smaller genre of modeling, and I think what happens is, and a big fallacy is that when most people think of modeling, they think of fashion modeling. If you ask the average person on the street, if you ask the average aspiring male or female that wants to be a model, what they think of when they think about modeling, they think about fashion. They think about models on the runway. They think about ads in fashion magazines. And fashion modeling basically is all about the clothing. It's not about the model. As a fashion model, you are nothing more than pretty much a mannequin with a heartbeat that's carrying the fashion down the runway or in a fashion ad. And, you know, a lot of people say to me, well, how come fashion models, when you see these girls walking down the runway, they're always like so mean looking? They're always like staring straight ahead and they're not acknowledging people. Well, they're not supposed to. Again, a fashion model is a person that's modeling fashion, and it has to be about the fashion. It's about selling the fashion. It's about making the fashion look good. You know, you're basically representing a product. And there's a small window for models to be fashion models because there's height requirements and you have to learn how to walk. And there's a lot more stipulations to being a fashion model than being a commercial model. You know, I learned a lot about commercial modeling through Aaron Marcus, through listening to Aaron speak and reading his books. And I learned early on from Aaron that commercial modeling is the wide open genre of modeling. It's playing a part. It's looking a part. It's about being believable as a babysitter, as a young mother, as a grandmother, as a doctor, a lawyer, a cop. And commercial modeling is basically wide open to those of you that want to pursue a form of modeling. And if you have some reliability and responsibility and you're accessible and you respect the people that are trying to help you, you know, you can really get moving in the commercial modeling arena, because if you can look like somebody, if you can play a part, or as Aaron says, you know, modeling without, acting without words, you know, if you can do that, you know, it's wide open. You know, most people don't realize that the men, the women, the children, the seniors that you see in magazine ads and on television, you know, some producer didn't just have his grandmother sit in for a day. I mean, these are all people that came out of agency. So maybe that's the long form of the answer. Fashion modeling is much more specialized. Commercial modeling, the window is wide open.
You know, and it's interesting. A lot of times people have asked, well, you know, why do fashion models, at least for women, why do they have to be between 5'9" and 6 feet tall and, you know, be 34, 24, 34? Well, the real answer is because, and it's exactly with what you were referring to before, is that the designers come up with samples in sizes that they think will make the clothes look best. And that's the size that they think it will look great in. So essentially, the models have to fit into the sample sizes. They don't make the samples for the models. So that's why you have all those restrictions. And also, like you said.
The other thing is.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the other thing is, if you pass by a store, you're not going to want to see an 8x10 picture in the window of a dress. You want to see a poster. That's why the posters are 30 by 40. Well, if you're a fashion designer, you don't want a 5'2" dress walking down the runway when you can have a 5'10" dress walking down the runway. It's just there's more visual there.
Now, I know a lot of times people think, you know, if I want to work as a commercial model, you know, I've got to, you know, be living in a major market. But we talk with Mark Soper, who is a director of an agency in North Carolina. Now, I know you're in the Annapolis, Maryland area. Maybe you can talk about the kinds of kinds of work that people could expect to get, in smaller towns on the East Coast as well?
Well, what's funny is every town I've ever been in has a magazine. There's Baltimore Magazine. There's Washington Magazine. There's What's Up Annapolis. Almost every town in every city has a magazine, even if it's, one of those wear magazines that you find in the hotel room. So there are localized publications everywhere. There's localized magazines. There's localized community newspapers. There's people that are running supplements in the newspaper, for your local area. So, you don't have to be in a major market to do commercial modeling. I've done photo shoots for restaurants where we've had to put families in the booth. I mean, we've actually hired moms, I'm talking about from agencies. We've had to have an actress that plays the mom, an actor that plays the dad. We needed child models to play the children. So just a simple local restaurant that wants to run an ad, and you want to see a family of four sitting in a booth all looking happy and smiling with good-looking food on the plate. That's one great example of commercial modeling, in your local area. There's a lot of hotels that, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you were just talking about, these models getting cast to be in an ad, would you explain to people what the process is like? As a commercial photographer, what exactly are the steps that go into putting this shot together as far as casting the models? So I'm assuming, so you would get a phone call from either the client, the person who owns this particular restaurant, or you might get a phone call from the art director or a creative director at the advertising agency, and those are the people. The art director comes up with the concept for the ad campaign, and the art director actually puts the the creative director comes up with the idea for the ad campaign, and the art director comes up with the words. Sometimes they're the ones that will contact a photographer. So would you just talk about that entire process of
Sure.
how models wind up getting...
Yeah, it could be a little of everything. In one instance, let's say a local restaurant contacts me and says, we want to do some food shots for our menu or for an advertising. And when I sit down and meet with them, I may say to them, do you want any shots of the restaurant with people in there, eating and enjoying the food? And that may not have been something they thought of. But if it is something that they're considering, and I'm talking to them one-on-one, the next step is, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, but, how expensive are models and where do I find them? And at that point, I'll say, I'll take care of that for you. Let me find you the models, and I'll work out pricing with you. Because in a case like that, it gives me the flexibility to choose who I know is available, who I know. Let me just say one thing. I get a lot of models that will either come up to me or write to me or send me pictures, and they'll say to me, do I have what it takes to be a model? And my first answer is, what you look like is number 5 on my list. The most important thing to me is, the most 4 important things to me are, are you reliable? Are you responsible? Are you accessible? Can I get in touch with you? Can you return a phone call? And are you respectful? And I mentioned that once before in this brief conversation. That's what I look at first. So if I'm working with a restaurant owner and he wants me to do a shot for him and he's going to give me the flexibility to choose my own models, I'm going after those that I know are reliable and responsible, that are going to show up, that are mature, that I don't have any problem with. I don't go for looks at this point. I'm going for believability. I'm looking for people that look like the mom, that look like the dad. But if I've had issues with you in the past, if you don't show up on time, if you don't return a phone call, if you're not reliable or responsible, nobody wants to work with you. Now, the other side of the coin, Aaron, is when an advertising agent calls me up. I just received a call a couple of weeks ago to do a shoot for Chevy's restaurant. But when an advertising agent calls me up and says, okay, we need to do a shoot, I've got my models from so-and-so, I need to go over some dates and times with you. And in that case, I may not have any flexibility. Well, what's going to happen in that case is the advertising agency is typically going to get in touch with local model agencies, and they're going to give them a demographic of what they're looking for. We want a Caucasian woman between the age of, 25 and 30. We want an African-American male between the ages of, 30 and 35. We want, the children this age. So sometimes they'll come to me and say, who do you have? And I'll show them pictures, or I'll put together a casting call where I'll have a selection of models come out and meet the owner. Sometimes I'll even do that for the model agency if they ask me, who do you recommend? Who do you work with? Who do you know is reliable? And then other times I have no choice. I'm just lucky to get the job to photograph, and I work with whoever they select.
Now, when you are actually selecting the models, do you typically have a go-see where people will come to you and you meet with them, or do people just send photos outside of the people that you already know and you can just call and say, hey, I've
Okay.
got a job for you, are you available? But when you don't have the right people, how would that work?
Well, to give you an example, I had a client come to one of the clients I do photography for. He's a commercial client, and he came to me and he says, "Look, I need to do 12 mini videos. They're going to be about 2 to 3 minutes each, and they're going to be up on my website. And this is a business-to-business website. It doesn't involve consumers." He says, "Do you have? I'd like to get maybe 3 girls and a guy. Maybe I'll give each person 3 videos." So what I did is I put together a go-see. I asked him, what are you looking for? What age group you looking for? You looking for men? You looking for women? Do you want the women to be certain ethnicities? And he basically said, look, I'm looking really for any 3 women and a guy. So what I did is I went and sent out emails or called models that I work with or have worked with in the past, or even if they came by 4 years ago for headshots, I'm still going to keep them in for consideration. I mean, I like to give back to the people that are giving me business. So I went ahead and called about a half a dozen models. I had them meet me at my home studio along with my customer, and he basically took them into a private meeting room that I have here in my home. He took them in one at a time, and he had each one of them read a couple of the scripts for him. And from those 6 models or so that showed up to read, he ended up selecting 3. So instead of having 4 models do 3 videos each, he had 3 models do 4 videos each. And, he looked for people that were articulate and had a good personality. So, I encourage, especially for something like that, I encourage the casting call or the go-see or the cattle call or whatever you guys want to call it. This is your chance as a model to impress somebody in person. You send one picture, you have one chance. If you can get to a casting call, then you have a little bit of a chance to show some personality.
Now, you also, along with doing headshots, you also do commercial shots, and you help create composite sheets for models.
Right.
And just so that everybody knows, there are a couple of different names for these things. It's a comp card composite sheet. Sometimes they call them Z cards on the West Coast of the
Right.
U.S. And essentially, it's all the same thing. It's a card that models use. There's no set formula, but typically you will have one photo on the front and maybe 3 or 4 shots on the back, but there are a variety of different ways that they can come up. But so, and I know a lot of times you will shoot those for the models. What are some of the important things that models need to understand prior to a photo session with you, as far as trying to prepare themselves?
Well, even before a photo session with me, the first thing a model needs to understand when she wants to have a comp card done or a composite card is hire a photographer that's capable of doing it. I'm going to tell you right now that not all wedding photographers can photograph models. Not all photojournalists can photograph models. Not all food photographers can photograph models. And the problem I find in this industry, and then by no means is this a self-plug for me, what I find in the industry is people are hiring wedding photographers to do their fashion photography. They're hiring newspaper photographers to put together their composite cards and give them commercial looks. You wouldn't go to a chef to color your hair, and you wouldn't go to the barber but that's what people do, and that's the problem. 2 big problems in the industry is that as a model, you need to go to a photographer that specializes in what you do, what you need done. And the second problem is that models don't like to part with their money, and photographers don't like to part with their money. So there's this wonderful marriage that happens every weekend where there's models that are working with photographers for what we call TFP, trade for prints, or TFCD, trade for CD. So the model's not laying out any money, and the photographer's not laying out any money. And the photographer is typically an accountant during the day, or maybe he's a waiter during the day, or he has some other occupation, but he's not a commercial photographer. And I have seen comp cards come across my desk where I've actually seen a guy in a plumber's outfit holding a pipe wrench standing in front of a purple curtain. I have had comp cards where I've had women that were leaning their elbow on the gas grill in the backyard with the trash can next to them. And I have seen this time and time again. And when you're handing out a comp card with 5 or 6 pictures on it, and this is your calling card, this is the most important tool, and I think Aaron will agree, one besides some education, your comp card is your calling card. That's your most important tool. You have one chance to put forth an impression that you are serious about your craft, that you're serious about modeling, and you want to do it right. And when you hand somebody a comp card that has pictures of you sitting on wrinkled bed sheets and curtains hanging on it, and you see this all the time, and models hugging trees. I have seen more pictures of models hugging trees. I don't know what the attraction is, but maybe I need to get some bark on me or something. But I see this time and time again over 34 years. And that's not impressive. But when you have pictures on your comm card that look believable, you know, if you want to have a picture taken where you look like a school teacher, then get in the school in front of a chalkboard. If you want a picture taken where you look like you're working at Home Depot, then get a Home Depot apron on and get a shot taken in Home Depot. They're not that difficult to do. But and I'm sure maybe you've probably heard this since 12 o'clock this afternoon, commercial modeling is about believability. Do your pictures look like ads? Does it look like you put forth some effort into getting the right pictures done? Do you look like the mother? Do you look like a babysitter? Do you look like the big sister? Do you look like a wife? Do you look like a girlfriend? Or do you look like you just hired somebody to snap pictures of you standing out in the front yard? That doesn't cut it.
And David, you're 100% right. I mean, you know, to create strong commercial photos, you want them to look like ads, and you want to show a variety of expressions and emotions. And the other thing that I've seen a lot that you have to be very careful with is your wardrobe. And also, when you are using props, you know, you don't really want to use a logo or a brand name in the shot, because that could cut you out of work for a competitor. So if somebody is holding a can of Coca-Cola because they want people to think that they did an ad for Coke, well, the problem is if there's a competitor like Pepsi, you know, and there's a big ad campaign and your composite sheet is being submitted, they're going to say, oh, you know, she worked for a competitor, let's find somebody else. So, you know, one of the things to keep in mind, definitely have props in the shot. I would recommend not using logos or brand names, and make sure that your wardrobe doesn't stand out in any way. You want your wardrobe to look like really nice wallpaper, so that it's like it enhances the room, but you don't stare at it. So you don't want to have really jewelry that's going to stand out, or I know, David, you've talked about like plaids and shirts and, you know, things that just grab people's attention.
Exactly. Matter of fact, I taught a course this morning for 2 hours, and that's exactly what we talked about, where shirts with logos and shirts with writing on it, and shirts with big flowers sticking out of them, and necklaces that take away from you, and leave the wedding rings home. You know, unless you're doing a shot where you are supposed to be a married couple, you know, leave the wedding ring home too. You know, again, fashion photography is about the clothes. Beauty photography is about the model. It's about the face. Commercial photography is about looking like an ad. You want agencies to look at your comm card and think that you've done ads before, that you're an experienced model. And here's the other thing that I have found. When an ad agency calls a model agency, for instance, and asks for, you know, send me the comm cards of the women you have in the 30 to 40 range, you know, because maybe they're doing an ad for Toyota. And the comm card comes to the advertising agency, and maybe somebody else in that office is doing an ad for Playtex or Gerber baby food or something, and somebody else sees that comm card and says, oh my God, she would be that perfect mother. So what I tell my models is make sure your pictures also suggest usage for you. If you look like a mother, it's going to suggest that, hey, she could play a mother. If you look like a billionaire, a wealthy, rich, you know, stuck-up snob, then maybe that'll get you that Mercedes ad. If you look like, you know, that you're the fitness instructor, the yoga teacher, then maybe that'll create the need or the interest in having you come in and audition for that.
Hey, David, I know we have to kind of wind things up here, and there are some questions that people want to ask, but just really, really quickly, can you just quickly talk about colors to avoid and possibly use for a photo shoot?
First thing I tell people is avoid primary colors. Red, you know, primary red, primary orange, yellow, blue, green, anything that's bright enough to take attention away from you, it's going to take attention away from you. I prefer to see my models wearing dark colors. You can wear blues and oranges and reds, but make sure they're very dark colors or very pastel colors. Blacks, white, grays, and earth tones are great. But,
Great.
if you look at yourself in the mirror and the first thing you see is that red shirt, that's a problem.
Okay.
The attention needs to go to you.
Great. Hey, David, I know that there are some questions, and because we're starting to run out of time, I did want people to be able to ask questions. Joel, would you be able to help us
Absolutely.
with the questions?
Yeah, sure. So Melissa has a question, David. She asks, what are some good examples of good poses or props for a 13-year-old girl, to use for her comp card? So if she's 13, what are some good poses and props she should be doing?
Some very good poses is really what's natural to you. I encourage some of the gals to take. Now it depends. When you say posing, is it fashion photography? Is it commercial photography? If it's fashion, look at the Kohl's supplement that you get in your Sunday paper. Look at Macy's. Look at Kohl's. Look at Sears. All of those supplements have pictures of kids your age in there that are posing for fashion. So that is a great way to look at some good posing guides. Look at people your age that are in all these supplements. My website. I'm sure you have a link to my website.
Yep, it's right on it's posneg.com.
Yeah,
It's right up on everybody's monitor.
posneg.com. And I have if you go to the top where it says portfolio, I have a children and teen section. And you'll probably see 30 or 40 pictures up there of nothing but kids in your age group with all different types of poses, whether they're sitting, whether they're standing. The more natural you look, the more casual you look, the better you're going to look. It's not about the perfect hand position. When it comes to children, I can just have the child sit. I can fine-tune their head position in my camera, and I want you to look as natural as possible. When you're talking fashion, look at the supplements.
And excuse me, Dave, I was just going to jump in there, and I have like a little bit of a different take on this. And like I said earlier in the day, people have different opinions. I don't view those kinds of magazines as being fashion oriented. I would view those, it is dealing with clothes, but since it's not really dealing with high-end fashion, I would consider those high-end commercial shots, the kind of shots I wouldn't get because I'm not, pretty enough or good looking enough to get those kinds of things. But definitely you do want to look at those kinds of publications. The other thing too is, you're 13, you're a student, so there's going to be a student shot. Maybe you're frustrated because you're not understanding something in school and the ad could be for a tutoring company. Maybe you are sick and you're lying in bed and you've got a horrible cough, and you'll use all the props that would be appropriate for that. Anyhow, I know we can get one more question in real fast.
Absolutely. Johnson asks, to have a comp card as a guy, as a man, do you need to show abs or skin? Is that necessary?
I once learned from a very prominent agent up in New York, they said if you don't have six-pack abs, you don't take your shirt off. So using that as a little bit of a guide, if you have six-pack abs, go ahead and show them off. But what I like to do with guys is maybe a business look. Maybe a boyfriend look or a husband look, something more casual. If you want to show the abs, then don't just stand there showing your abs. Maybe you're tossing a football around or something without a shirt. Or one shot I once did is I had a guy with great abs and a great chest, basically holding a football like he was a running back with his girlfriend, which was another model, jumped on his back with her arms around his neck. So it was a very playful, believable commercial look. But at the same time, he was able to show off his abs. Also, I don't know whether you had mentioned this, Aaron, but I'm offering a $100 off any photography session through the end of March. And as an example, my professional headshot sessions are only $249. So if you knock $100 off of that, you got a professional headshot session for $149, and that's good till the end of March for anybody that's on this summit.
I was going to mention that at the very end of the day, but thank you for bringing that up for me, that's an unbelievable deal for that. And just to kind of finalize that answer or the question, you will not see me with shots with my shirt off because I do not have six packs, and so it depends on the look you're going after. It depends on your body type. If you're trying to get exercise shots, that makes sense. But yeah, for anybody who is anywhere around the Annapolis, Maryland area, can get to the Maryland area. I know sometimes people fly in from distant markets to to work with David. So just go to his website, theposneg.com, and you can learn more about how to get in touch with David. I want to thank you so much for filling us in here with this incredible information. David, thank you so much again.
My pleasure. Thank you.